All right. Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Serhat Can, and I work at Atlassian. So I'm a technical evangelist at Atlassian, but before I was working at the Opsgenie team. So after the acquisition, now I'm working for Atlassian for about 2 years now, but I'm with the Opsgenie team for 5 years almost now. So I was in Warsaw, in fact, in 2017, exactly 3 years ago. It was one of my first public talks, in fact. So it was about DevOps and serverless. So it was a good time. I mean, I wish I was there with you again in person, like we could do this in person. But given the situation, I'm still happy to be with you today, even though it's online. So it's great to be here. So I'm, as mentioned, I'm part of the DevOpsDays core team. I'm also an AWS community hero, so I do a lot of speaking and writing and a lot of like organizations about AWS as well. So that's enough about me. So let's just talk about the on-call stuff. I'm passionate about on-call stuff because I've been working with customers like who are on-call for almost 5 years now. I was a software developer, software engineer. Then I was on-call, and then I became a technical evangelist. Now I'm less on-call, of course, but still, I'm very much interested in on-call. So normally, I would ask you a few questions like. Did you have like any experience dealing with an IT incident, and are you working in an organization that expects you to be on call? And probably you would say yes, because you are in a DevOps days. And lastly, I would ask you, do you think on call sucks? And normally the answer is yes, on call sucks. And I had similar feelings. I mean, I was on call and I had some bad experiences as well. But then, I realized that there are a lot of practical solutions to make on-call much better. And if you apply these practices, there will be, if you make these changes in your organization, that these can reduce stress and burnout for your on-call team. So I'm going to talk about those in my talk. And but before, I would like to talk a little bit more about on-call and why it is worth, your precious time. And I'm not even talking about like 5, 6, or 9 nines. I'm talking about 911, the service that our lives depends on. So it may be a different number in your country, like mine, but 911, the emergency service provider in US, had outages before. So I'm going to talk about 2 of them, relatively recent. So in 2014, on a Zoom morning in Washington, 911's IT projects and operations manager was alerted. So someone tried to reach out by borrowing someone else's phone. So someone couldn't reach out and only was able to reach out by borrowing someone else's phone. So the problem solved only hours later without a response. No one knew what happened. And in another outage in 2018, so emergency service provider faced an even more serious incident. So the data center provider that these telecom providers use to operate their services had an outage, and it brought down many 911 calls for major cell carriers over a day. Think about it, like your life depends. You cannot reach 911. It's very stressful. And to be able to solve these kind of problems, we need people on call. We need people who we can reach out to immediately. And of course, not all situations needs to be distressful. Of course, not all situations needs to be distressful, but obviously, even if we cannot send a tweet or send an Instagram post nowadays, we get mad because also companies get mad because they lose a lot of money. So most people, even though it's necessary, it's a must for these IT companies to have on-call people. Most people think on-call sucks. It's maybe because you can't go to the beach without your laptop, or you get up at 2 a.m. and it's definitely not fun. And also there's research backing this up, right? So researchers from the University of Hamburg work with 132 individuals from 13 organizations. So they collected daily surveys over a period of 4 days, during which they were required to be available during non-working hours, and 4 days during which they were not required to be available. So they also collected, cortisol level samples, body's main stress hormone, from 51 of them. So, and the results reveal that, on call, on-call time is not leisure time. So even if you are not on call, there are significant effects, of extended work availability on your mood and cortisol awakening response. And acknowledging this is important, because acknowledging this is, this helps us invest more in on-call and take actions to ensure we put enough effort to keep our people healthy, and hopefully they don't burn out. And as the software industry, we do a lot of good stuff. Like in the last 10 years, with DevOps, started making small iterations and automating a lot of the manual steps. So thanks to DevOps movement, DevOps principles and tooling, and we have a Atlassian has a supporting data on this. So our team talked with 100 IT professionals and found out that 57% of teams report fewer bugs and outages after they adopt CI/CD solutions. We especially see this in companies that adopting microservices. They tend to put more importance in CI/CD, and big companies see these benefits because they have a lot of teams and they put things into small pieces in these microservices architectures. But this is one of my favorite slides, but microservices definitely are not easy, right? So just you build CI/CD pipelines and automate things, that's not enough. So we took the idea of, the industry took the idea of empowering teams, individual teams, small teams, one step further, thanks to Dr. Werner Vogels, CTO of Amazon. So he changed the industry by, saying, you built it, you run it. This mentality is important. So we, DevOps also is similar. DevOps empowers both developers to do more on the ops side and ops to do more on the dev side, and they also communicate much better. And one example, so back in the days in Opsgenie, when we were 15 people, only 2 technical co-founders were on call. Then our load increased. We needed to scale our applications and teams. So on call was much harder for 2 people to handle. So then we started putting developers on call and paging them for urgent issues, and we saw a lot of benefits. So first, this helps increase, there is an increasing demand on availability, performance, and security within more complex systems. And developers are the most qualified people to identify and resolve these problems quickly. And another one is, being on call enables developers to experience these, problems, these production problems from the first hand. So they learn from them and implement better systems to minimize, these operational problems. And the outcome is often, better testing, documentation, instrumentation, monitoring, and alerting, all the operational stuff that matters. But usually, if developers are on call, they don't care about these things. And the last benefit is, maybe we sometimes forget about this, but management also is important, because they are the ones that are, telling us what to do most of the time. So when developers get these alerts, they spend their time, their precious time on these operational issues, not just, ops people that are solely responsible for this stuff. Also developers spending time on ops stuff. Now managers can see that, these things that they delay needs to be paid off. Like they now have clear reasons to prioritize this work related to reliability. So, I'm an advocate for developers being on call. I think there's great benefits behind that. Now I'm going to share with a personal personal story with you, and then we will move on with the practices part. So it was about 5 p.m. On Friday evening. So we worked on this feature for 2 weeks. It was a big feature relatively. So the feature was about Opsgenie is an alerting and incident management solution, and the feature was about indexing our alerting data to Elasticsearch. And one thing, maybe if you remember from this presentation, do not ship on Friday at 5 p.m. I'm not saying do not ship on Friday. Definitely, I'm not advocating for that. But maybe wait just for November, for Monday. Sorry, not November. So the issue was about indexing our alerting data to Elasticsearch, and so we shipped it. It was about 5 p.m. Then after 10 minutes, we tested on production. Everything was fine. Then customer supports a problem. So our customer success team asks, if something is wrong with the alerts page. And alerts page is, again, kind of a big deal because it's the most visited page. Like people enter Opsgenie, they see that page, and had inconsistencies, like they were acknowledging an alert and seeing unacknowledged alerts, and they were closing, and even though it's actually closing, they are not seeing the consistent state, up-to-date state. So the team was able to replicate the issue. Customer success team creates an alert using our Slack integration /Genie alert, like alert page showing inconsistent state from some alerts. Then on-call engineer from the alerting team got the page. He was also able to replicate the problem. Then on-call engineer look at the Jira board and sees that we sent the issue about the Elasticsearch. So then he knows that I'm responsible for that issue. So on-call as me as a responder. So I get paged as well. And we started talking on Slack. So we couldn't figure out what was happening for about like 15 minutes. Then we had to bring in the incident response team. We had the we created an incident from that alert on Genie, and then immediately 5 team members automatically paged. And so we hop on a call and start talking with each other. And then our first goal is to stop the bleeding first. That's common in incident response to bleeding. Stop the problem first. So we disabled, we had this option to disable one of the clusters. So we disabled one of the clusters because we figured maybe the problem. It actually stopped the problem, but we didn't know why. It was a risk, but it worked well. So after some testing, we realized, then we started getting alerts, from CloudWatch. It was because, more load was going to one specific cluster. So, but it was okay. We were lucky, like one cluster was able to handle all that load. And then we associated that with the incident. Then after a lot of debugging, we find a bug. Like it was, the bug was about like we didn't consider a signature of Elasticsearch, and we were writing an old state as an up-to-date state. It was a code mistake, and then we fixed the code, but we still have inconsistencies, and then we used a lot of time to be able to do that safely. So then it was about like 2 a.m. when we finally go home. So it was a definitely a stressful time, but even though it took some time, we were able to fix the problem. So now I have 4 key takeaways, both from this experience and from my other experiences as a both developer, advocate, and as an engineer. So I'm going to talk about these 5 key takeaways now one by one. And the first one is actionable alerts, because if you are getting a lot of alerts, no matter what you do, you are not going to be able to create a healthy on-call culture. Like no matter what you do, if you are getting I don't know, like tens of pages for every day or every week, I mean, there's nothing you can do to reduce the stress, and there's going to be also other problems like people ignoring alerts. And these alerts, no matter what, should be actionable. What I mean by actionable is that these alerts should be there for a reason, like something must have really happened, and there should be more context on the alert about how to start investigating the issue and more. Like this is important because these alerts, when they provide context and guidance, they help reduce stress for our teams. So the first important one is automated alerting. So in my example, in that case, we couldn't able to catch the problem automatically using a monitoring or logging tool. That was a mistake, but usually we do a lot of like monitoring checks in place. But even if you cannot, you should be able to like make it easy for your teams to create alerts and call for help. That's important. Then you need to be able to group these alerts if they're related under one incident, so that it's not like scattered around. And now when you need to focus on that incident, you have everything in one place. And the other one is escalation paths. Like in my example again, we were able to the customer success team was able to page the alerting on-call engineer with just one command. If on-call engineer didn't respond, we had backups. Like because it was a high priority incident, we have very strong aggressive escalations, not just 5-10 minutes, but after 1 minute send an engineer another alert. So it depends on the priority, but we need to have escalation paths just in case and alert more people if you need to. So also this helps reduce stress. Like if there's something happened, like you cannot respond to incident, you know that someone else is taking care of it. And automate to, if possible, automate a lot of things on the alerts itself. Like you don't want your deal with the context switch during a high stressful situation. They can make a mistake, or they may forget about important stuff. So the other one is training. So I'm going a little bit fast because of the time, so I don't want to like skip slides. My second key takeaway is on the importance of training, because as we train our on-call teams, as they practice more, they will gain confidence, and when they gain confidence, it becomes less stressful for them. And the first one is onboarding. Onboarding is important. Like you need to like I mentioned in the developer becoming on-call example, you need to add more people on call time to time. But before you need to onboard them, you need to explain the basics and give access to the right tools and train them. And for example, at Opsgenie, once engineers get some experience, we organize sessions and explain basics and some diagnostic tools. And we also use a technique called shadowing, where we put our experienced on-call engineers together with a junior one. So this makes transition, smoother and less stressful for on-call engineers. So the other one is we should also organize training sessions, which we often call game days. So where we try to run a real life-like scenario of incident response. So one thing we failed to do in my on-call story, we didn't have defined roles in a structured way, but we were a small team, so that was okay for us. But if you're a big team, it really helps to have like commanders, incident response commanders, subject matter experts, scribe, like defined roles. That really helps. We can, you can also automate some of these using tools like Opsgenie. So the third item in my list is transparency. So transparency is critical in many aspects of any business, but I think it is in our case because it simply makes on-call, more humane. So to put Atlassian's value, like open company, no bullshit value in practice, so we do many things. So we opened our internal ops handbook, and as Atlassian's Opsgenie teams, for example, we have our own internal documents for our on-call teams. And within these docs, we state our expectations around important policies, like the responsibilities of on-call, like how to switch shifts temporarily, and even flexibility, like of working from home after dealing with an incident at night, right? So specifying these policies help people know like what they are expected and what they are not expected. This is important because it's just if you are just talking about this and it's not written, people feel pressure, and we don't want that. And nowadays, like we see many companies approaching transparency in a different way. Some companies even share their internal docs. They literally broadcast incident response live. So there are a lot of things that you can do to keep being transparent. And one of the things that you can easily do is status pages. Like when it comes to transparency, stakeholder communication is critical. And these incidents are affecting our users that rely on our, these incidents affects our users that rely on our operations. So they need to. And in our case, we were fast to enter a status page, but we could have sent more frequent updates. That's also important. So and remember, status page updates are not just for external users. You should be able to also send frequent updates to other internal teams if your service, if they use your service, if you have a service that used by other teams. So the other final one in my list is about analyzing and continuously learning from incidents. So we can only get better if we analyze incidents we had and continue to learn from them. If we just have incidents and we just fix them, if we don't just if you don't talk about them, if you don't collect data and go over them, it doesn't mean anything. No matter what you do, you're not going to be able to improve yourself, right? And not everyone is comfortable sharing if they have problems with on-call. So you may, someone maybe don't say anything, and then they burn out, and then they leave your company, and you don't know what happened. So you need to be able to practice. So it is why we should record every detail about like on-call changes. So and incident response processes. So in our case, like Opsgenie has every log and detail on what happened, including this data. And some of the important metrics that I share on the left side of my slide are like overall responsiveness on alerts, mean time to resolve incidents, customer impact of incidents, alert severity levels, alert per source, alerts escalated by teams. Like these metrics can give you different insights on different things. So but of course, collecting them just collecting them is not enough. Remember that as well. So then, of course, you must have heard about postmortems or post-incident reviews. So we should be writing these post-incident reviews as soon as possible after the incident, because we tend to forget stuff. And we write postmortems to describe what happened and how we can avoid having similar problems in the future. So having these documents shared publicly help companies build trust with their customers. This is important. Like this is like status page entries. It also helps our communication with customers. So one important key in these documents is to be blameless. Most of you probably heard about these blameless postmortem things. It's not just a buzzword. It's definitely very important because we don't want to name people who are supposedly caused the incident. Like during stressful situations, it is people's often first reaction to blame people. And apart from that fact, like incidents cannot be avoided in complex systems. They are going to happen no matter what, and that's all right. Like, and probably you didn't have enough time to automate everything, and it's not people's fault. And naming people also creates a lot of other problems, right? So people will fear from doing mistakes. They fear from taking risky jobs, and worse, they fear from telling the truth when they made a mistake. That can lead to more serious incidents or problems. So we should focus on figuring out like how we can improve, and we should not look for a scapegoat. This is important, like postmortems, but blameless part is important. So one thing, I didn't put this in a separate title, but this is definitely important. In some countries, compensation for on-call is legally important. Like you must pay for on-call legally, but in some countries you don't have. So I remember, like as I said in the beginning, there is this research that says on-call is not leisure time. So even if there's no alert, like you need to think about on-call as an extra to your regular day job, and you can you don't have to pay. Of course, if it's legally binding, you must pay, but you don't. It doesn't have to be just a payment. You can also give a day off, like after a week on call, or after maybe a stressful night, or some companies again pay for on call. And the critical part is that if you expect your engineers to put the extra effort and take on call duties outside of work hours, you should think about compensating these efforts. This is important. So key takeaways. So we talked about how DevOps changed on call. It made things a lot better because of practices like CI/CD. We now have less bugs. We go to production incrementally with small, incrementally and in small pieces. Like we don't wait for two months to be able to ship something. So we could identify problems faster and fix things faster. And also the mentality changed. Like developers now becomes on call. More and more, this is becoming the norm in modern companies that puts importance in DevOps practices. Now developers are becoming on call, and this definitely makes on call much better for especially your ops team if you have one. The other main key takeaways we talked about. First one was actionable alerts. This is important because if you are getting a lot of alerts, no matter what, if you are not automating these alerts, if you are if you don't have proper escalation paths, people don't feel safe. Like if you don't have enough context on the alerts, if on-call engineer doesn't know what to do in case of an incident, then no matter what you do, your on-call is going to suck. So you need to think about alerting. Alerting is critical, and I know that there are other talks about alerting as well today, so you must watch that as well. The other one was training. We need to onboard new people. Maybe there's some adjustment period, like they spend 3 months maybe getting ready for on-call. During that time, you may employ practices like shadowing, like you put an on-call engineer together with a senior engineer, and they do on-call together, so they learn from each other, especially the junior engineer learn from the senior engineer. And you can do some game days, and game days will help people to experience in a real life like scenario before the incident. That definitely helps with confidence. And the third one was transparency. We talk about being clear on your expectations. You need to be clear, like who can do what, responsibilities and all. So you need to write them down, and you need to send status updates to stakeholders, internal and external. And the last one was analysis and learning. So you need to collect data. That's important. If you don't have data, you don't know what to do. So, and then you also think about writing blameless postmortems, and you need to think about compensation, just like I talked about. So one thing that I mentioned, one book that I want to mention is, I wrote this. It's a 100+ pages book, everything about on-call, that based on my experience, and everything that I mentioned in this presentation, and probably definitely in a more detailed way, are all included in this book. It's free, so you can just download it on the Atlassian white paper, atlassian.com/whitepaper/on-call book website. And also, because of the time limit, I didn't mention everything, but you should, if you are interested, you can read that. And so, as I told you before, on-call by definition is stressful and can lead to stress and burnout for people. And applying these practices will drive good results in making on-call happier and healthier for your organization. And one thing here that you should remember is that we should put our people first. And remember that the less stressful on-call is, the healthier your teams are, so they can focus on what really matters and can enjoy work and bring the best out of themselves every day to work. So I think I'm on time. Thank you very much. So it was great to be with you guys today. So I would like to be in Warsaw next year, hopefully, after the